love the new intro. Thank you, Jayme CheeseSlice. Who's on the ones and twos, of course, today? For our third interview of the day, we had two of good ones. We had Don DeBar just recently, and before that, we had Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski talking a little bit shop of what's going on today. And I just want to say that your father did business with Hyman Roth. Your father liked Hyman Roth, but your father never trusted Hyman Roth. But this guy coming on now, I trust dearly. I think he's one of the loudest and the most sane voices in the liberty movement. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel McAdams returns to the show.
Hey, Pasta, how are you?
I'm doing okay, man. I'm hanging in there.
All
Thank
right.
you so much for coming on. I love when you come to speak to us over here at the show, and everybody gets so excited when you're on.
I'm starting to look like Hyman Roth, actually.
I
don't know what's happening. I'm turning into an
those
elderly
glasses,
Jewish man.
you definitely do.
That's awesome.
I got a bunch of questions for you today, but you did write this recent article the other day. It's called The Changing Face of Regime Change. The Changing Face of Regime Change. As a person who's lived in the regime change news bubble, can you explain to us what that it's about, how the face is changing and what it means?
Well, one of the interesting things, I lived in Europe in the 1990s, and I was part of a group called the British Helsinki Human Rights Group. And one of the things that we did is we monitored elections, we monitored unrest in the former Eastern Bloc countries. And so we were there. We just happened to be like, just because of, one of the quirks of history, we happened to be on the ground in a lot of these countries when the early color revolutions were happening. From early on, Albania in 1992, then you had Slovakia, and you had Croatia, attempted in Croatia in the late 90s. There are many more of them. There was of course Georgia then in the early 2000s with the Orange Revolution, and then you had the attempted denim revolution in Belarus in 2006, and I was actually there for that one on the ground, the denim revolution. But one of the things that struck me, one of the reasons I wanted to write the article, and I don't pretend it's any kind of great new insight, is that early on when we were monitoring the color revolutions in these countries, the main pattern was basically you hold an election, the OSCE is there, but they've already determined the election is not free and not fair because the candidate who's ahead in the polls is one that they don't like. And in Belarus in 06, they had written the final election report before the election, so that tells you everything you need to know about it. But the main point was getting bodies in the street to say, hey, the election was stolen, my vote didn't count, it's not fair. And in a country of 5-10 million, if you get 5,000 on the street, somehow that lends it democratic legitimacy. Oh, the people have spoken. But nevertheless, at that point, violence hadn't really crept into it. We saw a little bit of that with Yugoslavia in 2000. There was a little bit of violence, and that's, I think, where it took a turn. And one of the things I pointed out is that what we saw in Maidan in 2014 was where it took a radical turn toward extreme violence. And if you remember, I'm sure you remember at the time, I was watching and you could see snipers on rooftops. You could see police for the first time getting slaughtered, getting beat up, getting shot, just with impunity. And so I think the regime changers decided that the application of extreme violence was very helpful in getting these things jump started. And so that's what we saw in Iran earlier this month. The entire event was started by a run on the rial, the Iranian currency, that coincidentally happened the moment that Netanyahu landed on U.S. shores trying to convince President Trump, hey, we need to go back at Iran. You guys go first. There was a run. Most people think it was something out of Doha, the futures markets. I'm not an expert in this, but we did see us drop in the value of the rial by 40%, and that caused a huge, huge problem, obviously, for the merchant class in Iran. And there was a protest that came from that, which was designed, I think, by the people who took a run on the currency. And what that did is that put things in motion. And then you insert your different cells, your different radical violent cells into this. You've already preloaded all of the Starlink terminals. You've preloaded. You've pre-trained. CIA has pre-trained these people on how to do things. And actually, Alistair Crook has a good article. We have it on the Ron Paul Institute website today about pretty much how they did it. inside Iran, how they would try to um, prompt police to shoot back by exercising extreme violence, by having shots come from out of nowhere. And that was a weird thing in Ukraine as well, by the way, in 14. And so you have to provoke the police into shooting back, no matter what it takes, because everything is very selectively videotaped or recorded. And so, well, the point I was making is the application of extreme violence, not just people being shot, but people being beheaded, people being burned alive. That was all important because you had to provoke the regime to react. And as soon as the regime reacts, all of the antecedents are ignored. All you have is on a very convenient piece of recorded tape, figuratively speaking, violence by the regime. And
Yeah.
President Trump already said that body count is all that matters. That's all that matters to me. So they went out to get body counts. So it's just it's an interesting and disturbing trend in how to overthrow governments, which is you must exercise shocking, not just extreme, but shocking levels of violence.
Wow, there's some great comments in the chat, by the way. It says, what is up with these critical thinkers? I'm glad you brought this to the table because, last week it was kind of fun to point out that isn't it great that anti-imperialist left like myself are now aligned so much with the Ron Paul peeps, right? The anti-interventionist of sorts. I think that's where, the separation is nowadays. It's not left versus right. Karen Kwiatkowski pointed it up. It's imperialist versus anti-imperialist. That's where the split comes nowadays. And I'm an election integrity activist. I've observed so many elections because I believe, Daniel, and maybe you can put a little cherry on top, whether this be the most important thing, because I often get criticized, like, what do you care about the election systems? The United States is going to say it's unfair. But I believe if a sovereign nation like Nicaragua, for instance, one of the 5 international elections I've observed, if they can prove that their elections is free and fair, that goes a long way for saying, hey, United States, this is democracy. You're supposed to believe in it. Now, let us have our national sovereignty and stand behind our election. But like you said, even before the election took place, they're saying in this particular case in Nicaragua, and the Biden administration was in, they were saying it was a pantomime election. It was phony. And meanwhile, for those Donald Trump people out there who are into election integrity since the 2020 election, I would say 1,000%, Daniel, that they would take the Nicaragua election, general election, over the United States election every single day of the week and twice on Sunday, because they have elections on Sunday over there on a day off where everybody can participate, and you must have ID in Nicaragua. Would you kind of confirm that elections are important when it comes to countries maintaining international sovereignty? Because if they can prove that they're democratic, doesn't that go against everything the United States says when they try to perform regime change?
Yeah, and at some point it's for the history books because you have the Stephen Millers of the world saying we don't give a shit. I don't know if I
Yeah,
can use that word. Well, but
you did.
we've got I did. Sorry. We have
It's
the
okay.
power to take what we want. If we don't think that you should be in power, we're going to sneak in the middle of the night and take you out of power. We can do that. But nevertheless, there is a thing called truth. And I didn't realize that you had done this. We may have talked about it in the past, but I mean, monitoring the presidential elections in '06 in Belarus, I had done a lot of elections, Albania, Croatia, in war zones. I was in Vukovar, very, very, tough zones. But the Belarus election, which of course was unfair before the vote was even cast,
Yeah.
I participated in the count in a precinct where it was probably one of the cleanest counts, one of the most efficient elections that I have ever seen. All paper ballots, all representatives from all parties around a table, no acrimony. They all had a job to do, and there was the Central Electoral Commission there, and everyone just simply agreed with the votes that were in question were put in the middle of the table. Everything was done very quickly, and everyone was satisfied at the end. It was an extremely efficient, very clean election. And of course, it wasn't accepted because the wrong person won, so that's how
Yeah.
it goes. But I agree with you, yes, because we have to at least be able to establish the truth.
Yeah, that's awesome too. That's why I love when you come on this show. This is why we can't have nice things too. And I remember the Honduras election I went to when we had when we witnessed the public counting, and everybody was so behind it, and it was so transparent that I began to cry because I want that in the United States, but we can't have nice things because unfortunately the powers that be, they don't give a shit about us. So now we
You said
both
it,
use
dude.
that word. Let's talk about ICE a little bit, because I know that you are liberty minded, right? I once made the mistake of calling you a libertarian, and you said you're not. But liberty-minded people, libertarian-minded people, they do care about our civil liberties. I used to try to say, people on the left, your best allies are the libertarians who also hate the cops, not because they just hate people or they just hate any infringement on their civil liberties. If ICE performs in a legal way as far as wearing masks, which is unconstitutional, unlawful searches and seizures, is anything they do, can anything that they do, Daniel, be considered legitimate as far as according to the Constitution?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. And violations of the Fourth Amendment are serious. So everything they do is legitimate. No, I mean, I happen to believe that we should have borders and we should know who's in our country. Ultimately, ultimately a borderless society would be okay, but there are constraints to that at our current situation. We should know who's in the country. We should be able to control that. And I think the Biden administration went way far the other way. But now the pendulum swings so far the other way that I mean, I have I have some very good Mexican American background American citizen friends, and I actually worry for them. Who dares go out in the street with an accent or brown skin? I mean, these people, they grab you up, and so it's very disturbing, And I think the right, unfortunately, is missing the point on this. But the old traditional left, we would be aligned with, and the very small remnants of the progressives that remain, we would be aligned with on this. There's a real disturbing issue. Yes, okay, we can agree that maybe people who shouldn't be here, there should be some consequences for that. But beating people up, I mean, if you can, you've seen the video, Basta. You've seen how they're acting. F word this, F word that, pushing people, knocking them over, no response. It's just gone way too far.
Yeah. Yeah, it has. And I do think the right is lost in this. I don't understand the mentality of breaking the law to uphold the law. I mean, what happened to all these constitutionalists? And, Rand Paul, and the other day in Congress, in the Senate, said, it's crazy when a party is in power, they'll stomp all over our Constitution, but when they're not in power, they'll claim that the other party is taking advantage of it and not abiding by the Constitution. It goes back and forth. We talk about this pendulum swinging. My second question about ICE is: you hear all these leftists, I don't want to say American leftists, the culture war critters, right? Talking about abolish ICE, abolish ICE. I don't see that as an actual solution, because can't they just kick it to another department or create another department, a la George W. Bush, who's supposed to be about small government but expanded the government? What is the actual solution to curtailing what ICE is doing illegally?
Well, one of the things, just before we do that, is my friend Ryan Dawson put this up, and it's a little mean, but I think it's actually accurate. They're not really after illegals. They're using illegals as an excuse to create a police state aimed at you. And I think that's what it's really
Exactly. I
about.
saw that
Yeah.
tweet. I'm like, man, we
Yeah.
think alike. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. But the whole ICE situation, everything was the result of reform, if you remember. After 9/11, they created the Department of Homeland Security to, quote, streamline government. So you add more layers of government to streamline government, and it was and Dr. Paul warned about it at the time. This will not be a government entity that will be going after the bad guys. This is a government entity that will be going after us. And that's exactly what's happening. First it was increased surveillance, and then it was, remember, the TSA having full control over the airports. They can put their hands down your pants and do all sorts of things just for your freedom to travel, which we have. We should have an ultimate freedom to travel. The government should have no business knowing where we're going or what we have in our bags. And then it's progressed on to, well, we're going to beat you up because you're brown, basically, is what it is. So yeah, you can't keep creating these different layers. Of course, every problem is not for the federal government. I mean, you're sending in National Guard troops. You're sending in a bunch of hammers to solve problems of tiny little problems, and it's creating more layers of government is not going to help the problem at all.
Yeah, it seems that like they're addicted to creating more levels. Man, government's ever growing, and I'm a leftist, right? And I want limited government. I can't believe I say it all the time. I would like a limited government. I think government has a place. We probably would disagree. Infrastructure, healthcare, education. I would say military and defense, but they've gotten so far out of hand. I don't even know. Sometimes I think the libertarian mindset of like privatized security might be the best way to go, especially with there being so many guns in the United States. I'm not saying that. I just don't, want the state to continue to grow, especially with the Pentagon, because that's where the majority of our money is spent. Let's get to Iran. Is there been a little bit of kind of like secondary thinking in Washington now with this latest failed regime change where it fell over worse than the Bay of Pigs right now, right? You know what I'm saying? And just think about how much money is spent over the years for these operations. That could have been money being spent at the home instead of the CIA having their own playground and doing whatever they want to do on a regular basis. Do you think there's some secondary thinking? In other words, is this going to put a kink in the armor of the planned bombing of Iran that I think a lot of people in the United States and Washington said is coming very soon? I think we all get a sense Donald Trump has said, well, if they're not going to be abiding by the nuclear things, we'll bomb them again. And, BB's been pushing for this. And I think a lot of people have said, not if they're going to bomb Iran, but when. Do you think there was a deterrent this last time out where the United States could go, man, Iran's a different country with these hypersonic missiles, and they were able to thwart a regime change so easily? Maybe that's all there is. Or is it more like what what's his name said? Not Robert De Niro, but Al Pacino said in Scent of a Woman, no, we're just getting warmed up over here. What are your thoughts on the immediate plans for Iran as far as military?
Well, that's actually the word I was going to use. Is there a certain level of deterrence that's been reached now? The production, the not only the production but the design of Iran's missile system. That's why the Israelis are screaming that not only is nuclear enrichment off the table, but they've got to give up their ballistic missiles. Like, yeah, Iran, do what everyone else in the region did. Give up your weapons, and then Israel will bomb the crap out of you until you have absolutely no way to resist. There's no one. Whatever you think about the Ayatollah, he's not insane. Right, he's not going to do that. So I think a level of deterrence is reached, and from everything that I've read, it's Bibi himself that had a panic attack and said, call off the dogs, because we know, and this is what happened in June. The conventional wisdom in the United States, unfortunately, the narrative has been that Israel kicked Iran's butt and Iran was screaming for help. When in fact the opposite was true, and we've seen it. We saw the hypersonics land in Tel Aviv. We saw the unprecedented damage to Israel's ports, and they were just getting started. They were just getting warmed up, and so we see that a level of deterrence, I think, has been reached. And so the U.S. application of the Israeli technique of decapitation strikes didn't work in June, and it also didn't work in this current coup attempt right now. So I think there's a realization. But the problem is, if you and I did a couple of dumb things, we put some dumb bets, men on a bender or whatever, you're gonna say, okay, look, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. The
Yeah.
problem is the money just keeps coming. If this doesn't work, they're gonna try something next time because they never give up. So the problem is this impulse that lies within our military intelligence community. A lot of it's driven by Israel. There's a great John Mearsheimer was on with Pierce Morgan. If you saw it a couple of days ago, or maybe it was even just yesterday, when Pierce Morgan conflated the threat of Iran, and Mearsheimer said, "Well, they're not a threat to us." And he said, "Yeah, but they're a threat to Israel." And Mearsheimer said, "Well, yeah, but that's not the same thing. You're expecting me to view those as equal threats. They're not, and that's just a fact." So until this impulse changes that we have to overthrow the government, we have to force the entire world to be exactly like us or else. And this is a problem, by the way, that's runs deep in libertarianism, in libertarian circles, which is a kind of not to offend any of our friends on the left, but it's sort of a libertarian Trotskyism, where I love liberty so much I'm going to impose it on you. Right, and
Yeah.
and so people will be, well, I'm rooting for the people in the streets, I'm rooting for the people rising up for freedom. No, they're not. They're a bunch of stooges paid by Western intelligence agencies to create murder and mayhem. They are not down in the streets looking for freedom. They're not going to push freedom. And frankly, if you think that every single time this happens, you're too stupid to be taken seriously. And I'm actually been toying with writing a short little essay, and I think I'm going to do it, which is why I root for the Ayatollah. Because people don't understand that. They think that there's somehow this we and them, that, there's this red, white, and blue flag. So anyone who jumps into the streets, they automatically identify with our values and we have to support them. And I completely reject that idea. I would stand with the Ayatollah. I would stand with Maduro, not because of their policies, but because if they have a victory against this demonic war machine, the CIA, the Pentagon, the overthrow machine, if they have a victory against these thugs, there might be a reaction. They might be forced to slow down and to stop doing these things overseas, which would actually be a benefit to the United States. So a victory of Ayatollah over these thugs, it doesn't mean that we're going to go theocracy. But what it means is they may think twice before doing it again. And when our people think twice before creating murder and mayhem overseas, it's a win-win for everyone.
Well, you don't have to worry about calling us leftist Trotskyites because the anti-imperialist left are anti-Trotskyites. We're more in Stalin camp. I know that doesn't make you feel warm and comfortable, but we're a little bit more favorable to Stalin than we were to Trotsky, just for the record. Not to mean that we thought he was great on everything, but we lean a little bit more in that camp. So bottom line, do you think that Iran, with all the weaponry they have, could do some damage to Israel?
Well, Israel and the American bases. I mean, the last thing Trump wants, the last thing he would want, think about his ego. The last thing he would want would be for Iran to hit a bunch of U.S. bases in the region. And anyone, you just go on to X and look for the meme, look how many bases that, that we have around them. And you will see that it is a target-rich environment. And that's not even to say the USS Abraham Lincoln, who apparently is in the neighborhood. What if you sunk a carrier? What if you launched a hypersonic and sunk a carrier? It would be an absolute disaster for President Trump, and so that's the last thing he wants. So I'm sure there are people around him, particularly people like his CIA director who are telling him it'll be a cakewalk. It's easy. Don't worry. They'll fall apart at the first moment. But there have to be some people around him that are telling him that it's not true. The last thing, again, he wants is to see American service members die. And that's what would happen if he attacked Iran. Americans would die. And everyone thinks that the Iranian response against the U.S. base in Qatar was just a symbolic strike. Well, I would urge people to look into it a little bit more, because one of the things from what I've read and understood that they struck is a very, very specific piece of radar equipment. With the precision of that strike was unbelievable. I mean, down to a meter. And I think that shocked the United States at how precise the Iranian weapons were. That wasn't just a kind of let's lob a missile to tell them we're pissed off sort of thing. So I think there must be some people in the Pentagon. It's not full of dummies. There's got to be some people who understand this.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of people in that Pentagon that would be happy if Iran killed some American service members. So then it would give them take the dog off the leash and perhaps use nuclear. We've been paying attention to what's been going on in Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro was kidnapped. Do you think, after seeing maybe these pictures surface of Delcy Rodriguez, who's the vice president, who's now been sworn as the president, and there's been a lot of talk of this, that she's now shaking hands with a CIA agent and has made some changes in her cabinet, do you think that there was some degree of betrayal from the Venezuelan government towards Nicolas Maduro, that they maybe given him up to go along with business after analyzing this whole situation? Because there are people who say Nicolas Maduro gave himself up, the Venezuelans gave him up. Nobody gave them up. There were 32 Cubans were killed, 80 people were killed total. There were some service members from the United States who were hurt, that they're kind of keeping a lid on. What are your thoughts after the smoke is now cleared and we're starting to settle into what's going on moving forward in Venezuela?
Well, I think it's clear that someone gave him up. I mean, someone in intelligence. I don't follow the personalities as closely as possible, but I would think that with Delcy Rodriguez, I mean, it almost doesn't matter if she's the one who gave up or not, because the CIA has basically put a collar around her neck. and they can tighten it as they wish. They can let things leak out that maybe she was a part of the part of it. So it's sort of a weird symbiosis because they need her. For Machado in power, you would have had civil unrest by now. There's no question because you're already seeing some. And the New York Times is already starting finally to report the fact that people are in the streets. It's not a critical mass, but they're saying, well, we want our president back.
Yeah.
What's going on? They're already pissed off a little bit about that. So the U.S. needed to have her remain there, the appearance of basically things being the same. But they can't have it look like she was the one that sold him out either. So I think it's a very tricky situation right now. But I don't think we've seen the last of it. I mean, I think something more is going to happen. This isn't the end of it.
Yeah. Well, that was my final question to you: is what do you think is going to happen in the near future in Venezuela? Because whether she's controlled opposition or has a part to play, or her father was a guerrilla, like a revolutionist. So it's like to think that this woman is just going to just roll over. She's still a Chavista. I mean, and Donald Trump is talking like he's the president of Venezuela. So what do you think? What do you see happening in the very near future in Venezuela? Because let's not also forget, it's an armed citizenry. They armed the citizenry, and I think they're still waiting to think if America's going to come in here and just think that they're going to do whatever they're going to do. They got another thing coming for them. What do you see in the near future for Venezuela?
Well, he's only the acting president, right? According to his own post. So acting president, and he'll soon be the acting prime minister of Greenland, or whatever you want to call it, the acting governor of the state of Greenland. And there'll be a big 40-foot Trump statue in the middle of Greenland or something. Will be the case. But the whole thing takes on sort of a comical, if not for the fact that 100 people are no longer here who've been killed by the United States, about the number that have been blown out of the water off the coast of Venezuela by President Trump. A President Trump who, by the way, only called off the attack on Iran because they agreed to not execute some of the ringleaders. This president, as Dr. Paul wrote about this week, this president is somehow, pro-life. Here's the guy who executed people without charge, trial, or jury, what have you. But one of the interesting things about not only the Venezuelan situation, but the Greenland situation is they've got stuff we want and we're going to take it. We are going to take 50 million barrels of oil, and that's all there is to it. Stephen Miller said it as well. But, there was something interesting. Anna Kasparian had a great little segment with Ann Coulter. We had it up on our show as well. Ann Coulter was saying, yes, it's all, we're going to steal it. We're going to steal it. F you, we don't care. And Kasparian said, well, who's we? What are you talking about? Because I'm not getting any oil. I'm paraphrasing what she said. I'm not getting a check. I'm not getting oil. It's not me that's benefiting. What we've done here is we've socialized the costs of taking that oil, and we're going to privatize the profits. We already know that the oil companies are in there. They're going to go in. They're going to make a fortune. Military industrial complex is going to make a fortune. All we're going to get is, higher gas prices, what have you. The same is true in Greenland. They've got minerals, and by God, we're going to take them. Well, who's we? I'm not getting any money from it. We did a segment on our show this past week. The Kiel Institute in Germany came out with a study saying that 96% of tariffs are being paid by the American people. They're not being, this is like the no-brainer of the year. They're not being swallowed up by these companies wanting to sell to us. They're being paid by us. So what this is, Apostate, is this is a massive transfer of wealth from the working and middle classes of the United States to the donor classes of the United States. That's what's going on. And it's even worse than imperialism. As bad as imperialism is, this is even worse because there's no benefit across any layer of society. It's all going to go to the Paul Singers. It's going to go to the Adelson types. This is where it goes to. And the rest of us are getting screwed. Yeah. And that's the big deal.
It's crazy because you helped me out with my pilot that an RT is supposedly starting to come back. I guess they signed some waiver and people are starting to get back to work. So that's kind of cool. But on that pilot, my friend Gerard Michaels, who's also been doing some interviews here on this channel, he's more of a pro-imperialist where he has this mindset where a lot of other people think that our national security and resources out there need to be secured for the benefit of people. But it's not like somebody's knocking on my door going, hey, here's your check for $600 now that we got that oil from Maduro. That's not happening. You said so yourself on that episode. It's not like anybody's coming to give us anything. They're taking it for themselves, and we are left out in the cold. Daniel McAdams, thank you so much for doing this here. 2 interviews with Pasta de Jardula, our Pasta to Go. Tell everybody where they can find you. I know a lot of my people know they just go look at the Liberty Report you do with Dr. Paul. But maybe there's other stuff they can enjoy about, Daniel McAdams. Where can they find all that other good stuff?
Sure. Well, we do publish every day a couple of articles on ronpaulinstitute.org, and I try to curate them to be the most sort of thought-provoking. And as I said, Alistair Crook is on today. People like that who I think are thinking way outside the box like you and I do. If you have a strong stomach, I'm at Daniel L. McAdams on X. It's a little spicy, guys, just saying.
It's a lot of spicy.
Yeah, you get that way a little bit. You got to let off some steam.
Yeah.
Well,
Mario on the wall, right? So
conferences,
it's
by
so
the way.
funny because, by the way, you mentioned that Ryan Dawson thing, and I saw that. And there's one thing that Ryan Dawson meant. It was not just about getting a security state on its own people. It's also about putting the Republicans on the grid, the same way Democrats were put on the grid during the COVID, their QR codes. They want to make sure the Republicans get a QR code. And Donald Trump's going through with the true IDs and all these other things. So they're going to use immigration as a way of putting you on that grid. This is something that Catherine Austin Fitts said. But Mario on the wall, right? He was kind of having this kind of George Bush attitude, like, oh, no, Donald Trump did react to Iran. He put aircraft carriers over here and there. And I said, I think you raised the question, why is he acting this way? And I said, because he's always been part of Mockingbird media. And I think a lot of people out there now are seeing all these people who were tapped by Elon Musk on X, like these Benny Johnsons, these Nick Sorters, these guys who are not journalists. They're just cheerleaders. They're part of the whole Mockingbird media. We have to watch out for that. But we know people like you are not, because you're still being demonetized. You're still being shadow banned. I mean, you should have so many more followers, but you don't, because in my personal opinion, you talk too much common sense and you're an enemy of the state, but you're a friend to Pasta to Go. And I can't thank you enough for coming on, Daniel. I always have a great time talking to you.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me back.
Definitely, buddy. All right, that's it for today. That's the third and final interview. We'll be back on Thursday. We're going to try to do this. Last time we didn't get this done because I had to go take off. But we're going to have The Last American Vagabond. We're going to have Kyle Anzalone and Wyatt Reed. Those are guys who are scheduled to be on Thursday. I'll make sure I touch base with them. Those should be some solid interviews, especially there he is in the middle, my paisan, Kyle Anzalone. All these guys right here I'm such close friends with, right? Like, I go all around Latin America with Wyatt Reed. We've been in Nicaragua together. We've been in Brazil together. We've been in Cuba together. The Last American Vagabond, man, Ryan Christian. I've been friends with that guy for so long. I used to do a Tuesday show with him every morning. We used to call it T-Lab Tuesdays at AM Wake Up. He still does it. You can check out AM Wake Up with Steve Poikonen. And you know Kyle Anzalone. He's had me on his show. I've had him on my show. Yada, 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 back and forth. And the guy grows his own tomatoes to make his own tomato sauce and his own pasta. So he'll be with us here Thursday. In a couple hours, I'll be on The Homeless Left with Matt Weinglass. We'll also have Kelly Lane dipping in there. We'll be talking a little bit about elections. We'll talk about ICE. We'll talk about Israel. We'll talk about all those things that are in the media today. I can't thank you guys enough. All the links down below to help the show are there. I want to thank the Super Chat people earlier today for throwing a few bucks. Guys, we're just starting this back up. I had a very crazy year last year. I was sick for most of the time. I couldn't do this. So now we're coming out of the gate swinging. So expect a lot more interviews like this. Great interviews from all these people. Daniel McAdams, Karen Kwiatkowski, Don DeBar. I want to thank you all today. Jayme CheeseSlice for running it on the ones and twos. That's it. It's time for Pasta to Go. See you later.